Hello, one and all, and welcome to another episode of Baggers Chat. My name is Mitch Patterson, and as always, I'm joined by Ethan Daffy. And of course, this week we are previewing the Carlton v Brisbane game, round 8, Friday the 5th of May at 7:50 p.m. Make sure to get down to Marvel Stadium because it's going to be a massive clash. But first things first, Daffy boy, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. It's an exciting clash always. I think with Brizzy, it's always, which Brizzy you're going to turn out. Sometimes they're really on their game or a little bit off. So I'm just hoping it's a kind of replay of that 2019 game where Cripper had 38 and 4. So, yeah, it's an exciting game. Both teams coming off pretty decent wins. So against both Perth opponents. So I'm looking forward to it, mate.
The Carlton Respects game. It's still quite a shame that we still have to be actually advertising and I guess trying to raise awareness for this every single year because it still does unfortunately happen. But of course, the objective for the campaign is to create a society of equality and respect in schools, communities, and workplaces to prevent violence against women. So I think it's great how the club has done that. Of course, they started, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago, but I think it's great how they also involve the players where they go out to the schools and the communities where they might need the education to kind of raise awareness for that cause because unfortunately it's still appearing in our society, in our modern society. So Daffy boy, what's your thoughts on that? And of course our the games that we've played in this, we are winless in this whole cause, but hopefully, more importantly, for this cause alone, we try and really raise awareness for it, but also for the game this week. Hopefully, we can try and get a win and go from Willis to maybe one win in this cause. What do you reckon?
Yeah. I think obviously I think it's our eighth game. I think we're 0-7 in this game, but I think that's overall not the issue. Well, it is an issue on field,
Yeah.
but off field, obviously the issue's quite significant. And like you touched on, it shouldn't be happening, and it's still happening at a very high rate considering. I feel like we're pretty well educated currently in this space, but we've still got to continue to educate younger people and even older people in this time. So it's fantastic. I think it's a good kind of cause in terms of we can show our orange colours on Friday night, and it's just people can buy stuff, and I think if you buy stuff from the club, most of the money goes to Carlton Respects. So make sure you do go and buy a beanie or a scarf or even a jumper for your little kid or something. But it's a good cause, and looking forward to it continuing.
Yeah. And I think it's good that I think a lot of clubs do this now, like within the club, where they kind of have a campaign for these sorts of causes, like whether it's Collingwood and Melbourne doing it for, of course, the Big Freeze with Neil Danaher. Like if they buy any merchandise within that week or the weeks coming up to that event, all that money goes to that, of course, like the organisation, which I think is fantastic. So I'm really glad that we've gotten onto this, and I'm sure it will be a thing for many years to come, and hopefully it actually it does come to a stop because that means that we don't have to really educate any more people because everyone just understands it. So that's where I think the end goal is for this campaign. So hopefully we can try and get to that. But of course, we'll now move on to a little bit more of the game ahead. We'll touch on some injury updates that, of course, have come out from the West Coast game. So there's been no injuries from the West Coast game, but also from the VFL last week, there were a few. So Matt Owies is back this week to training. I don't know whether that means that he's in maybe for a selection or if he just needs to go back via the VFL. Matt Cottrell starred. I mean, he didn't start, but he got 18 disposals, 1 goal in the VFL last week, which is solid. It's a solid enough performance. And of course, TDK is unavailable for selection this week because of concussion. But Dave Boy, is there any of those names that you can consider coming back into this side?
Yeah, obviously, it's good we didn't have any injuries post that West Coast game. I think every game this year we've had something, niggling or something annoying, which has been annoying, very, very annoying.
Yeah.
But with Owies, it's good to see him back in training. I think obviously he had that slight hammy in the Giants game, which feels like a long time ago now. But it's good he's back in training, and he's a vital piece the way he was playing. I think we just lacked that kind of half forward Currently, Matty Cottrell, he's a good face to see in the VFL. I thought he was good last year. Obviously had a bad injury during the preseason, so you probably give him a couple of weeks, or maybe chuck him as a sub this week. That's my kind of thinking. And then obviously TDK unlucky with the concussion, so hopefully we see him the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, spot on. And so I know that we will transition into the potential inclusions that we think will come in and out. But so for Matt Cottrell, there's a guy in our senior side, of course, Ollie Hollands, who has played a lot of senior football. We saw last week how Lockie Cowan was, I guess, managed to the VFL to get his body kind of used to both sides of the spectrum, whether it's senior football and reserves football. Do you see that happening this week with Ollie Hollands maybe being managed and playing a few weeks in the VFL and Matt Cottrell coming in, knowing that also Lockie O'Brien is also in the VFL and performed quite well? Is that something that you might see happening, or is Ollie Hollands such a vital component to this side right now that he has to stay in?
Yeah, I think it's a good point to raise. I think, like with Cowan, obviously you've played a lot of senior footy, but I just feel with Hollands, he's kind of a different kind of beast, isn't he? He's winning the running numbers every week. He knows his role. He's obviously kicked a goal on the weekend, which many of our players actually did. But no, he's really good. And I personally think the best way to put a Cottrell in is through the sub, because he can play a few roles.
Yeah.
A half forward goes down, he can play half forward. A winger goes down, obviously wing is his kind of preferred position. Half back, like he can play a lot of positions. He's not necessarily small, but he'd kick goals going forward, as we saw last year, and also he can also have a roll down back on someone. So, and that's going to be important this weekend, because I feel like there's a few of their forwards that are dangerous, kind of high half forwards.
Yeah.
Obviously, you got McCluggages on the wings, and it's going to be good to see if we can bring in Cottrell maybe third or fourth quarter, bring that energy which he always brings. So that'll be a massive talking point, I think, in selection for these coaches this week, because I feel like most of the year we've kind of realistically fucked it up in the sub point of view. Like, you've got Lockie O'Brien, he hasn't enough of impact. He only plays one position.
Yeah.
You need, for the sub, you need a bit of versatility in terms of like a utility role. But yeah, it'll be interesting, man.
Yeah, I completely agree with Matt Cottrell, because in the VFL, he was playing a little bit more half back. So he was getting a little bit more of the ball from the half back flank, where he kind of transitioned through the midfield as well on the wing. But his position was a little bit more half back, and I don't mind that, because you've of course got Blake Acres, who is not going to come out of this side. Of course, if his form stays the way it is, but also Ollie Hollands, who probably will not come out of the side either, because he's so important. So if you've got a Matt Cottrell, as you just mentioned, then as a sub, you can chuck him anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's why I reckon we'll transition into the potential inclusions, because there's also a name that we haven't even mentioned yet, that starred also in the VFL. So, of course, this week, Jesse Motlop is available. So whether he comes straight back in, or whether he has to earn his right back into the side through the VFL. Lockie O'Brien, of course, that we just touched on, 22 disposals with 2 goals. I reckon that is a performance where he puts him at least back in contention to come back into this side. And of course, Jackson Binns. So this is a name that has been talked about a lot through the VFL. And he once again did very well on the weekend, because he got 28 disposals with 1 goal. So whether that is a guy that comes in, maybe a Josh Honey gets dropped. So what do you see happening here, Daffy Boy? Do you see some names coming in, some names coming out? What do you see?
Oh yeah, it's always a weird type of conversation as a Carlton supporter. I think our selections sometimes are a bit iffy, but I think there's a simple swap. I don't think we need to swap many players in and out. I think Josh Honey's probably due for a rest. I thought he was better on the weekend, but realistically, Brisbane are a better opponent, so you kind of got to base it off the performances he's had against better teams, and they haven't been necessarily great. So I think, I know we said Motlop was probably due for a rest, and he probably got his rest through suspension. So I think he comes in for Josh Honey for mine. And I'm not discounting O'Brien and Binns. I think they'll still chip away at, knock on the door of a selection. But I think I think Binnsy specifically will get his go. I think he'll be in when Hollands eventually is out, maybe through injury or resting and managing.
Yeah, so maybe that is one of those guys that Vince can kind of only come in if there is an injury, which is what we've been crying out for the past few years, is just depth. If there's an injury, there's someone who can come in that we can kind of rely on, that he is going to do his role. So, of course, before we move on to some matchups, the sub situation. Last week we saw Matt Kennedy as our sub and Ed Kerner was in. Do you see that being a straight swap where Kennedy comes in and Ed Kerner is our sub, or do you see it the exact same way? Because I know that Matt Kennedy, when he came on for that fourth quarter, he was wanting a best 22 spot. He didn't want to be the sub for the week after. So what do you see happening there? Does Matt Kennedy maybe come in and maybe Ed Kerner comes out? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Kennedy's the best 22 player, in my opinion, but it's just a matter of where are you going to fit him into the midfield mix. I think that's the issue we had at the start of the year. We had too many of them. I think once Walsh came in, it was a bit of a, it was like we had so many in there. Like it got a little bit, it was just over depth almost in the midfield in a sense. So I think obviously they shifted him back because of Sard and Doherty, and then he didn't have his place at half back. So depending on what they want to use him for, obviously, like you said, he came in and played fantastic. I think he's 22, best 22. So it depends how they see Ed Kerno's role and Kennedy's role, because into the four walls when they're talking about both players, are they is Kennedy more of a guy who drives forward, or is Kerno more of that disciplined player that he's going to pick up his man defensively? You don't really know how are they like for like with Vossi, or are they not? I think we see it as yes, that I think they're a swap, but it's going to be very interesting. But he's capable as a sub as well, Kennedy. Like against the Lions, you bring him in during the third quarter or something, and they go, shit, Matt Kennedy's out there. You can chuck him at half forward. I personally think he's a straight swap for Kerno. I think Ed's just struggling a little bit, really having an impact on the game. So it's interesting because he was half back, and then everyone's like, he's good ahead of the ball. So why are you switching him and Kerno? And why isn't he starting at half forward? Bam, bam. So it gets the brain going, Pato, because you keep thinking about it all week, and it gets annoying. But it's a good problem to have, because we've had guys like Jed Lamb playing at half forward.
Yeah, exactly right. Jed Lamb, shout out. But yeah, so to touch on there also about Ed Kerno. So I completely agree where maybe Vossi doesn't see them as a like for like, because in that midfield mix, we've got a lot of attacking midfielders, but we don't necessarily have any negative midfielders in a sense of taggers. Yeah. So maybe George Hewitt is that one, and maybe Ed Kerno as well. But if you put Kennedy in and you take Ed Kerno out, you don't have any guys that can. If anyone's really dominating the game for the opposition, you don't have anyone that can really negatively stop that player. So maybe that's why Ed Kerno is holding his spot in the side. I don't really know his exact reason as to why he's in the team, because I reckon he would be the perfect sub for that reason. Yeah. So if it's halftime and someone's dominating, that's when you bring Ed Kerno in to tag someone. So that's my reasoning behind it. So we'll move on now to some matchups. So the back line, of course, to start off with. So looking at these names across the whole line. So obviously Brisbane are a very solid side. They have stars on every line. So to touch on now, Lewis Young and Jacob Weitering up against Joe Danaher and Eric Hipwood, which, of course, transitioning through that key forward as well is, of course, Jack Gunston, who is a guy that they've added into their team this season. So out of those three, and of course out of our defenders, who do you see going to who, and who are you most worried about out of those three, and maybe some others as well?
Yeah. Well, obviously they've got a pretty potent forward line. I honestly think, Danaher and Hipwood on their day can be really good, but they can be really terrible as well. So hopefully we've got the right day for them. But no, I think Gunston's the one. I think he always gets a handle on us. I think last year he kicked a couple of goals in that last quarter in that comeback for Hawthorn, which they didn't end up coming back from. But he's just kind of that dead-eye dick, at times. It's like 10 minutes to go and he's marked it. He's kicking the goal. So I think if you keep him out early, then his head is, kind of out of the game in a sense. But him being the third forward, but he's probably almost their leading goal kicker, which is I think that's their key problem at the Lions with their key forwards. But you'd probably go, oh, they're pretty agile, so you'd almost go Weeders to Danaher, and I reckon Hipwood Young. I think Hipwood probably pushes up the ground a little bit more, but then Danaher does it as well. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be a lot of handing over, switching players probably throughout the game, and Gunson he probably gets a Brody Kemp in my opinion. I think Kempy can play the role and kind of play off him a little bit.
Yeah.
Force him to defend a little bit, and then obviously they have their small forwards, which is a lot of them. So with Charlie Cameron, I think that's I think Nick Newman's got the job there.
Yeah, and we were just about to touch on Cameron. So whether that is maybe Sard going with Cameron because he can be that he can match him for speed, but also Nick Newman where he can really be that lockdown defender where he can't let Charlie Cameron run away because he's always just around him. So I completely agree about Kemp going to Gunston. I think size-wise, I think Young would probably have to go to Hipwood. Wienering would probably have to go to a Danaher. But what you've seen from the Brisbane Sands from their back line is Harris Andrews has been playing as that more loose key rebounding defender. So maybe that this might be the time for where either it's McGovern or Kemp, one of those two needs to be that intercepting defender, and one of them has to be that lockdown defender. So, so I think it's, I mean, we didn't even mention about like Zach Bailey as well going through there, Lincoln McCarthy as well. They've got a lot of stars in their lineup. So it's a big test, massive test, but I think after last week, I think us as supporters, we can at least expect a chance for us to win. We might not necessarily win, but at least try and just get close to winning that game. So now we'll move on now to the midfield clash. So we'll, of course, as every week we name 3 midfielders from us, 3 midfielders from them. So of course, Cripps, Walsh, and Shearer up against Lachie Neale, Josh Dunkley, and of course Ashcroft. So it's a big, like those midfielders there. Lachie Neale is an absolutely fantastic player. Josh Dunkley as well, of course, another recruit this year. And of course, as we touched on it earlier, Hugh McCluggage as well, transitioning through there. And of course, Zach Bailey. Zach Bailey's been one of those guys that has transitioned through that midfield as well. So out of those 3, and of course the names that I just mentioned as well, who's the most worrying for you, Duffy boy? And how do you think we need to try and stop it?
Well, I think we you got to look at all of them. They've all got different strengths. I think Dunkley ahead of the ball when he goes half forward, gets a lot of goals most weeks. Gets a fair, not a lot, but in terms of he had a lot of impact going forward. Ashcroft obviously kicked that ripper goal last weekend, which was crazy. He's going to be a superstar. He's getting better by the game, and obviously Lachie Neale is kind of that accumulator, and he gets a lot of the pill and very, very good with it. But yeah, like realistically, I don't want to talk ourselves up here, but you just for a second on this sheet, just look at our 3 names here and look at their 3 names. Our 3 names are better. Like I'm not trying to be biased here, but we've got the Brownlow medalists. Obviously, they've got one too. But Walshy, he was good fantastic on the weekend, and then obviously Chera, who is ranking very, very highly in the AFL currently in midfield. I think there was an actual post about him on one of those big pages like AFL Central or something like that, and they're talking him up, which is good to see. But yeah, it's just nullifying Neale getting the ball. You're turning his 30, 35 or 30 to maybe a 25. He's going to get a lot of the ball. Realistically, he's going to get a lot of the ball. Just about his impact with ball in hand. I think Ed Kerner's actually been quite good at him whenever he's played him, especially that 2019 game when I touched on. He was on him a fair bit, and there was a bit of biffo. But with McCluggage and Bailey, like you said, in the forward line, they're kind of zipping around, aren't they? There's players that zip around, they come in, they pop out, they kick goals, they get touches. Bailey's probably my favourite player for the Lions in terms of his impact when he's in there. So it's going to be tough, but we've got Cripper, Walshy, and Ches, mate. So we'll get the job. And then Georgie Hewitt's also lifted a bit in the last couple of weeks. So it's good to see.
Yeah, and I needed to touch on Adam Chera very quickly because his improvement in the past few weeks has been absolutely fantastic because a lot of Carlton sports have been crying out for where is this guy that we trade up so much for to bring him into the side. I reckon last year he was still quite solid last year, but he wasn't really living up to the I guess, hype that we kind of gave him. And the past few weeks, he's been fantastic. And even this season, like, he hasn't had a lot of the ball towards at the start of the season, I guess. But the past few weeks, he's had a lot more of the ball, but effective disposals as well.
Yeah.
And you touch on there about Lockie Neal, and I don't mind if Lockie Neal gets 30, 35. It's just down to whether they're effective enough. So whether
Yeah.
that means that there is a guy like George Hewitt who not necessarily is tagging Neal, but he's keeping around Neal. And he can still, because if he's keeping around Neal, he's still going to, like, Hewitt's still going to get 25, 30. Because been want to try and get the ball into Neal's hands. So my worry is with if Neal is kind of, I guess, stopped in a way from our sense, whether that opens up someone else from their midfield, whether it's a Zach Bailey, Hugh McCluggage. There's so many names that they can really put into that midfield. That's what I'm worrying about. I'm not necessarily worrying about a few names. It's down to whether if we stop one, that might open up a chance for someone else. So that's my main worry. But we now transition into the rucks, where I reckon this is probably the biggest ruck battle of our season. I think Oscar McInerney is still one of the most underrated ruckmen in the comp, in my opinion. I reckon he's very much like Riley O'Brien. They aren't necessarily skill-wise the greatest, but just solid, I guess, old-fashioned ruckmen. They are both fantastic. And I still reckon Oscar McInerney is a vital part of Brisbane. And if he goes down, that's when they can really they're pretty much nothing without Oscar McInerney. So Pitnet is up against probably his toughest test this week against Oscar McInerney. But how do you see this playing out? Of course, no genuine second ruck for both sides. So, of course, us, we have probably a Lewis Young or even a Jack Silvani going through there. But also for them, they would have a Joe Danaher maybe being in the ruck. But other than that, there's not too many other second rucks. So what do you see happening here for this matchup as a whole? Who do you see coming out on top?
Yeah, well, Pito, we touched on it, I think maybe in the review or one of the recent episodes about his hit outs to advantage. They're really vital for our midfield, and we've got a lot of the ball first time in the last couple of weeks, especially at St Kilda game where every midfielder in our club had about 40 touches. So, no, seriously though, like you said with McInerney, he is crucial. He's a big boy, flies around, hits bodies, gets a little bit annoying. He's one of those. He's got a bit of C-bomb about him. He's got a bit of, I'm not going to say the word, but he's got a bit of, C-U-M about him. He gets you, he ruffles the feathers in a sense, you know what I mean? Like every week he's getting into that ruckman, mate. It might be a Gorn or it might be, whoever it is. So we're going to have to expect that from him. He's got a good, competitive edge about him, and he kicks goals as well when he goes forwards. But for me, Big Pito, he's flying under the radar, and I'm liking it. I'm liking that he's flying under the radar a little bit in the AFL world, but they are talking about his hit outs to advantage recently. So I think there was a post about it just like a few hours ago. So it will be a big battle, but I think Pito, he can get the job done, the big fella. Yeah.
And I think it's now that with Mark Pitnet, because he's been we all know as Carlton supporters that we have really we know how good Pitnet is, but it's now good that the AFL world, in a sense, is now getting around Pitnet and seeing how valuable he is to this Carlton lineup. Because for him at the start of the season, for not even being considered as the number one ruck, is, to me, I always was confused about that, because I thought he was by far our best ruck. No disrespect to TDK. It's more just down to Pitnet, what his ruck craft can really open up our midfielders in a sense. So I reckon that's why Pitnet is so important to our lineup, and that's why this ruck matchup will be so fascinating to see what happens. But the forward line now, of course, from our line. So Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow up against Harris Andrews and Payne. I know that Payne's actually been quite good the past few weeks. He's probably gotten a little bit more of a he's gotten a little bit more of a opportunity this season, because Fagan is looking to really try and play two lockdown defenders, hopefully with an Adams coming back, or even a Gardner in a few weeks' time. But Harris Andrews now is playing as that intercepting defender, it seems. So, of course, with Rich not playing as well, which is a massive out for them, how do you see this playing out, Duffy boy? Who Who do you think is the matchup for Kerner, and who do you think is the matchup for Mackay?
Well, with Andrews, I don't think you're going to be the extra this week, buddy. You got two big fellas. I know Harry's, not in the best of form, but you can't let him off a leash. You can't let him off a leash and give him a sniff. So I think Andrews probably goes to Harry, in my opinion. Payne's kind of that more. I guess they're both versatile, Andrews and Payne, but I think Payne probably usually takes the best forward, and that obviously in that case it's Curnow. So you look at that and you go, Jack Payne, that's probably his toughest matchup of the year, realistically, and it's really fun to say that as our own forwards that dangerous with 30 goals. So, but like you touched on with Rich. There's a guy, he kicks a token goal every year against us.
Yeah.
Every year. Every bloody year, that bastard. Just always off half back. He's always launching one against us. So I'm just, hooray, he's not in that team. So I don't have to see that again, witness that live again.
Yeah.
But he's a big out for them. He's a little bit like Sard and Doherty in terms of driving the ball from D50. So that's going to be big. And obviously they've got Dane Zorko out as well. So they're both out for 2 to 3 weeks, which is big outs in a sense, but I think it allows Brisbane to kind of think outside the box.
Yeah. And whether that is, so if Rich was to play it and whoever comes in for Rich, whether it's Starcevic playing more as that Rich role or whether it is someone else who comes into that side, I think he has to. Bless you, Daffy boy. But whether it is someone who comes in for that side, whether it is someone who pushes back, I'm not too sure what they're going to do, but it's whether it's down to whether whoever takes our smalls, because it's whether it's Corey Durden, Jesse Motlop, hopefully if he is back, but also Zach Fisher as well. So there's a few guys that they also have to look at as well, because yes, we have the two twin towers in a sense of Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow, but then we have to try, because they don't have a lot of small defenders that can take those. So it might not necessarily be a big night for Charlie Curnow or Harry Mackay, because it seems like they have their hands filled with Harris Andrews and Payne. But now it's down to whether these small forwards can really star, because these two, Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow, have been so good this year. Maybe it is a chance for maybe a Corey Dern to really kick some goals. What do you think about that? Is it a chance this week for the small forwards to really star?
Every week it's a massive chance. When you've got that, like, two pillars up forward that can bring the ball down, it's crucial. And I think my favourite small forward we have is currently Corey Dern in terms of that breakneck speed. There's something about him in it. There's something about him. I just think I think Jesse Mollop has to come in. I think at Marvel, and like you said, they don't struggle with smalls. Obviously, Starcevic and that are pretty handy, but with Rich out, like, you look at that and you go, geez, like, that can really open up for even a Jack Silvani as a third tall forward. I think they've got a few guys in there. Ryan Lester, who I actually know personally, but that'll be interesting.
Yeah, cool. So now we'll transition into, of course, the match predictions, where we kind of have a chance to see, we kind of put our Vossi hats on and kind of see what's going to happen. So of course, Duffy boy, I need your best on ground, your point of difference, and of course your win or pass margin, which will be quite interesting.
Yes, best on ground. I'm starting to think I should do these off the top of my head rather than thinking too early. I think based off our chat, sometimes that leads to someone being a best on ground. And for me, this best on ground, it's going to be different. He's going to be coming back into the side. He'll be coming back into the side. I think he's going to kick his career best. It might be a 4 or 5. I think it's going to be Jesse Motlop. I think there's something about it. There's something about it this week. I think in that North game, he had, 18 touches or 19 touches and 3 or 4 goals. So if you can put up that performance as a small forward, I don't see why that can't be a best on ground, Pato. I'm thinking outside the box, Pato, here.
Yeah, mate.
I can't be on boring Cripper and Walshy. They're too good, mate. They're too fucking good. So I'm going with Jesse Motlop. Point of difference. I'll say it again. I did say it a few weeks ago, but I feel like this guy is not talked about enough in the Carlton sphere and the AFL sphere, but it's Alex Cincotta, man.
Yes, yeah.
This guy is a reincarnation of Adam Sard, bro. He's not. He didn't go through the draft system like Sard. He's got that pace. He didn't look out of touch last week. especially in the Saints game. I feel like you can tell when they come to the AFL from the VFL, they can't adjust to the pace of it.
Yeah.
But he doesn't phased. I've got him in the super coach, so hopefully he has another big week. Alex Connor's the point of difference, mate. And winner and margin, I think it's time, mate. We tame the Lions this weekend. 22-point victory at Marvel Stadium.
I mean, I like it. I like it a lot. But this is where it kind of transitioned into my match predictions. I mean, we're going to touch on the win pass margins, but you know me, Duffy boy. I always like to keep inside the box, mate. So we'll touch on the mix on ground. So I mean, of course, I have Sam Walsh. He's had a few weeks where he's kind of transitioned into this senior side, and now I reckon this is time for Sam Walsh to really have no doubt whatsoever. He's going to be the best on ground. Point of difference, once again, I'm keeping it inside the box, Duffy boy. Sam Doherty, I reckon right now, this is like with these guys in the side, this is going to be the game changer. So Sam Doherty rebounding off that halfback, it's going to be so important to us, especially at Marvel Stadium, especially at Marvel Stadium with Sard as well. So let's hope that Sard and Doherty really start. And winner pass margin, I've got the Baggers by 6 points. I've got the Baggers by 6 points. I was going to tip the Lions, but I think, as you said, I think it's right now. This is a statement game. We have to respond this week. We can't be shit scared of the Friday Night Lights. We can't be shit scared of the opposition. We are the Carlton Football Club. We don't get intimidated. We don't get scared of anything. So this is why this is massive. I do hope that it is a close game in a way. Like, I mean, I would like it to be a little bit, but I just want a really good game of football between really good sides. Because if we produce a really good game of football, especially on Friday night footy, a lot of people will be talking about how good these sides could be. So this is why I mean, of course I would love us to win by 40 plus, but if we could just win a really close game and showcase our pressure, our mindset under pressure and win, that will take us forward tremendously. So other than that, Duffy boy, is there anything else you want to touch on for the episode?
Just get the win, boys. And also with Chera, they telling, he's pick eight. Like, I know he's a handy player for Freo, but they got Jai Miss, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
We're talking Adam Chera and Jai Miss, mate. We can't be comparing the two. Like, Chera's 23. They've got rid of, we talk about Freo a little bit. This is not Freo chat, by the way, but Freo, they're all going, Acres is shit. So they've given up Chera, Acres, and Langdon for nothing, really. And look at those players. They're all in top sides. So it's interesting talk with Freo. The Freo chat podcast's going to be going off currently. They can't win a game to save themselves. So hopefully the Bag is going to win Paddo and launch this next month, which will be tough.
Completely spot on. Freo chat, of course, but now we're going to step back to the Baggers chat. So of course, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do it all. And as always, Daffy boy, up the Baggers.